Today I'm going to be upcycling an old dining room chair. These have a flat back on it, and so I added a few little extra pieces at the top and at the bottom to give my spindles a little interest. And I gave it a coat of the Deco Art multi-purpose sealer just to seal it up, so I was going to be painting it. For the red part, I used the Waverly chalk paint to create the red part at the top, and then I just used a chalk paint in black to be able to do the rest of the parts for the back and the bottom. For the face, I was using the warm beige color by Deco Art. For the beard area, I was using slate gray. I basically just painted the front pieces of where the face shapes were, and then the rest I left it solid. I'm going to be adding detail as I go along. The first detail I want to add, I'm going to be adding some shadows to my face, and I'm going to be using the watercolor floating type of technique. I'm basically using water, dipping my brush into my water, and then tapping it on my paper towel until I see the shine gone. And then I dip just the corner of my brush in paint and then rub it back and forth on my palette. That's going to push the paint from dark to light, and I'm going to come out with those really pretty little blended shadows. I'm going to add them around his nose, on the side of his face, and underneath his eyebrows. This is a great way to add that extra depth into your facial features. I just basically drew kind of a funny shaped nose. It's a little narrower at the top, flares out on the side, and then comes to a little bit more of a point at the bottom. This is just going to accentuate it and add that little extra character to this face. It's a simple way to add a lot of character to your pieces. Once I had the shadowing done on his face, I mixed up a little bit of a light gray color, and that's the color I'm going to use for his eyes. I'm going to do this light gray color first around what we would consider the white part of our eyes. When you're painting these, it's helpful to start out with a color that's not so bright white right away, and then we'll add little pops of white in the end to the center of the outside of our eyes, and that's going to just add that little extra twinkle. So that's why I mixed the light shade of gray to put on around on the inside of his eyes. Here I'm mixing up just a little bit of a light shade of the flesh tone color and just putting that on the front of the nose. I'm not going to do a lot of extra painting on that nose. I'm just adding just that little bright white down the center, and that's going to pop that nose forward. Next up, I'm going to be adding a little bit of pink coral cheeks to my Santa. I'm using a soft little scruffy brush and then just using a very much a dry brush technique. I often put it on my hand, and if the paint feels dry, I know I have enough off, and I can go ahead and add a little bit of blush with my coral first on his cheeks, and I added a little bit on the front of his nose as well. And now I'm using a little darker shade of red called Deep Burgundy, and I'm going to double blush his cheeks. So I like adding the light color first and then blushing a little bit of the dark on the top. I like a double layer of the pink. I'm also going to add a little bit of that to his nose too. Next up, I'm going to be adding the colorful part of his eye. When I do the eyes, I only want partial circles. I don't want whole ones. If you see the complete circle of your eye, it's going to have very much a surprise look, so I always do just partial circles. I'm doing the blue first, and then I'm going to be doing a green-eyed Santa and a brown-eyed Santa for these spindles. The next step I'm going to be working on is creating the beard for my Santa. I'm going to be using a rake brush for this step. When using a rake brush, you want to water down your paint, and you kind of just scrub it in a little bit to your rake brush. And then you're going to be striking your paint down on your beard in a direction that hair would actually grow. This is a great brush to create this look. Your white paint will look a little whiter now because it's wet, but as it dries, it's going to dull a little bit. So you're going to need a couple coats when you do this technique. But this brush works super great for making that hair look for beards and whiskers and things like that. I go up on the side of the face a little bit to add some of that area. I'm not doing the mustache yet. I'm going to leave that. I'm going to be doing that by hand with a small little brush. Mostly I'm just concentrating on his long beard area and a little bit of the top of the hair and on the side of the face. I need to let the white part that I just did on the whiskers dry completely before I add another layer, so I'm going to go ahead and put the black part of the pupil of my eye in. Again, I'm only looking for a partial circle. The top part will be cut off, and you'll see the colorful blue part all the way around on the bottom of that dark eye. Once the white part of the beard was dry, I was going to be adding the shadow layers underneath the mustache and on the side of his beard. I thought this would be a good time to mention that I am a part of a YouTube collaboration today all about Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. We have two hosts today. We have Dawn with Shabby Meets Bling and Monica with Up All Night DIY. The links to their channels will be inside of my description box, as well as a playlist of all the other videos that have been contributed for today's collaboration. Definitely take some time, check out their channels, and click that playlist. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something fun for your holidays. By first adding the white and then now adding these darker shadows, it's really going to make a difference in the end by having the dark underneath and then adding the little sparkles of the white by the next layer. Once the shadow areas have dried, I want to use my rake brush and apply another layer of the watered down white paint. This is very much kind of a soft stroke that you're using and creating with this brush. If you push too heavy, your lines will be too opaque, so you want to definitely water down your paint and use those nice little feathery strokes when you're working on the beard. Once the beard has had time to dry, I'm going to start working on the mustache. For this area, I'm going to be using a small size round brush and hand stroking in the paint the direction that the beard would be growing. You definitely want to water down your paint, still keep that light paint look that you created using the rake brush, but this time you're going to be doing it by hand. This just adds a really pretty kind of feathery look to this area. I'm going to be adding that feathery look to the top of his eyebrows and onto that side of that face as well, even just a little bit at the hairline too. This is another one of those techniques where you're going to put a layer on, let it dry, and then we're going to be adding some shadows after it dries. While those areas are drying, I'm going to turn my attention to the bright colors of his eyes. I'm going to be doing a watercolor float technique at that base of the blue eye. I'm using the color Admiral Blue by Apple Barrel. It's a beautiful color to do these watercolor floats over, and I'm adding that just a little bit of bright blue to the bottom of his eyes. To add the shadowing for his mustache, I want to put that around his nose area. I also want to add just a tiny bit of the dark float on his eyebrows and just a little bit on the side part of his hair. I'm going to do that floated look again, but I'm also going to be drawing the color out so it's a little bit of a line work as well in those areas. Once the shading color is dry in those areas, I'm going to apply another part of the white paint. Again, I've watered it down. I'm using my small brush and doing those wispy little strokes to create that very feathery look. I'm going to be going past where I drew my mustache. I want to add that little wispiness down a little lower, and I'm bringing it out onto my face as well. So that's going to add that little bit of softness there. To add a little bit more bright, now down below, you can take some of the white and then just hand stroke in some lines down in your beard as well to bring a little bit more brightness in if you would like it to match your mustache. To give my eyes a little bit more character, I'm going to be mixing a darker shade of the flesh tone that I've already used, and I'm going to be painting a little bit of an eyelid at the top. By seeing a little bit of the eyelid, it's just going to soften my eye and bring a lot of character to his face and make it even a little bit more expressive by having that little area of the eyelid painted up above. It's a small detail, but it can make a lot of difference in your little painted characters. Another detail I like to add to my eyes is I like to use my Kimberly 9XXB pencil. It's a very soft leaded pencil and it almost works like charcoal, but I do sharpen it to kind of a nice point, and I put that charcoal line around my eyes and a little bit up above, and then I can soften it a little bit with some water, and it's going to add another dark layer to my eyes, and it really does pop them out in the end. I'm a mixed media artist at heart, and I love using some line work when I'm creating my little characters. This is when I'm going to add the brightness to the whites of my eye. I'm using my little brush and adding a little touch of white in the tear ducts and on the outside of the corner of his eye. I'm going to be adding bright white dots in the black part of his eye. I use the end of my brush and create the larger dot, and then use my small little brush to create a little swoosh of white at the bottom part of the black part of his eye. The one nice thing about acrylic paint is that you can always tweak it, add more layers if you want. If you make a mistake, you can always cover it up and repaint it. There's a lot of grace when it comes to acrylic paint. Now that the faces were all painted, I was going to be adding a few dot patterns to the rest of the spindle. The end of my paintbrush worked perfect to be able to add the dots. Once my piece was completely dry, and the dots do take a little bit of time to dry because they're so much thicker, I took some 80 grit sandpaper and sanded the edges of my piece. I did in the centers of the red and the black as well because I wanted those areas to have that very much an aged look, but I avoided doing any sanding on the center of my face. This is just going to pop out that raw wood underneath, and it's going to be taking a coffee stain really well. That'll bring that aged quality to this piece that I was looking for. For the coffee stain, I just took some instant coffee and added some hot water to it. I'm a little heavier on the instant coffee. I wanted a nice rich tone of color. The chalk paint absorbs the coffee beautifully, and it adds that extra darkness to those sanded back wooden areas. To keep the darkness, I take a chip brush and just pounce it on my area instead of wiping it back with a paper towel. I wanted to add some of the stain to the face as well so I could tone that color down, but first I sprayed it with water so it wouldn't be so dark. Once I had it on, I could take some paper towel and just tap it out lightly. I was going to be putting the stain all over the black, and one of my favorite areas was the black of the look of the coffee stain over the top. It just gave it such a rich look. These pieces will all get a coat of matte varnish at the end once they're all dry, so that is what will seal everything up. The gold paint looked really pretty too with a little bit of the coffee stain on the top. It just added that extra quality of the agedness to it and gave it that vintage vibe I was hoping for. This is the varnish I like to use. I gave them 2 coats and let them dry. Now these guys, I wanted to have kind of a woodland Santa look, and this fun fur I had in my stash worked perfect to create their big old furry hats. Oh my goodness, isn't that adorable? I basically just cut the strips, hot glued them on the back, had to do a little hot gluing at the top too to make sure that they were fitting just right. But I just love the look of these little furry hats. And that's about all they needed. I thought about maybe adding some greenery, but I like them just the way they are. To finish off the bottom, I used some coffee stained fabric and just simply tied it into a knot. I had some rusty jingle bells in my stash as well, so I added those to the bottom. I wasn't for certain how to finish off the top or how to hang them. I ended up just using some rusty wire and create a hoop. Well, let's take a look at what they look like hanging in my studio. The night is getting late and it is a little dark, but I think we're going to be able to see them just fine. And here they are. That 1980s dining room chair worked perfect to create these Woodland Spindle Santas. I love how the jingle bells and the simple little fabrics finished off the bottom, and you can really see all the textures that come to life by using that coffee stain. If you look close when you look at the beards, you can see how that brush really does add the hair quality to the beards and the mustache. And you gotta love those furry hats. If you're new to my channel and you like doing art and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really can help my channel grow. If you enjoyed this tutorial, here's a couple more you might want to check out. Well, thanks for joining me, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.